I walked in, I liked your podium immediately because you can't see how badly my knees are shaking. And I'm not sure if that's, I think that's because of the people sitting at this table who are my heroes. I've known Wallace and Tom for over 30 years, and it's awesome for me to be here to speak for their anniversary. It reminds me that when I get behind the podium of the people who came before me, the people who brought this program to me, and all they asked was that I pass it on in undiluted form, and I try to do that. And not many of you know me, but for those people who know me well know that this is not the way I normally dress. I much prefer Wranglers. But I was taught early on that when you stand behind the podium, you show respect for the program that saved your life. And I try to do that. My name is Sandy Mikesell, and I'm a real alcoholic. By the grace of God, by the power of the program that I found in this book, and the power of the fellowship that I found in rooms like this, I have been sober since November the 17th, 1980. And for that, I'm very grateful. Well, thank you. My family's pretty impressed by that, too.
My name's Tara, and I'm an
Well, we're glad you're here. The big book's very specific about what my job is here tonight. I'm supposed to share with you in a general way what I was like, what happened, and what I'm like today. I'm also supposed to share with you in my own words and from my own point of view how I established my relationship with God. I was born on October the 4th, 1950, into a staunch German Catholic family. I was teethed on beer. I was drunk the first time I know about when I was 7 years old. And I don't think the way I was raised had a thing to do with my being an alcoholic. Because if it did, I'd have 2 brothers and 2 sisters who were alcoholics, and that's just not the case. I'm the only lucky one. I'm the only one who made it here. I'm the only one who needed to make it here. There were a lot of things that went on in my family. We were taught to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, to the early bird gets the worm. You can do anything you set your mind to. And those things might be okay for normal people, but for this person, it just set me up to be a real good alcoholic. I never quite fit in. I never felt like I belonged. I was always a half step off. I was always wondering what to say, what to do, what to wear, and I always seemed to come up short. I used to, if I walked into a room and there were people talking, I wouldn't say anything because I felt my opinion was so poor of myself that I didn't think I had any value in what I said. But then somebody might say something, and I think that was my idea. That was what I was thinking. But I was too afraid to share what was going on. Because if I thought you knew what was going on inside of me, you wouldn't like me. You wouldn't accept me. We had, as I was growing up, we had wines with dinner. We had drinks. My father drank a couple of drinks every night after dinner. He liked scotch, and I used to suck on his ice cubes. And that's how I acquired my taste for scotch. My first significant drink was when I was a junior in high school. I was going to a party. I was nervous, so I drank before the party to get comfortable. When I went into the party, they had something called sloe gin. And I thought it tasted like fruit punch, and I drank it like fruit punch. And I don't remember much about that night. But the next week, people said, gosh, Sandy, you were the life of the party on Saturday. You had so much fun. You really brought the party to life. And I thought, I want to do that again. I want to do that again, whether I remember it or not. As I said, my family, drinking was accepted in my family. I never saw my father or mother drunk. My father, as I said, drank every night a couple of drinks. My mother did what I considered alcohol abuse. She mixed it with Coke or Sprite, put ice cubes in it, let it melt. To me, that's alcohol abuse. Alcohol is meant to be drunk straight up, and you drink a lot of it. And I did my share. When I graduated from high school, it was sort of an unwritten rule that I would go to college. All I wanted to do was run away and hide. I didn't want to try anything that I didn't think I could be successful at. And so I had started doing things with the way other people did. I made decisions based on what other people did. My two sisters went to a college in Greensboro, so I sent in an application, the only one I sent in. I got accepted, and I went to UNCG, which at that time was primarily a women's college. And I got on with going to Carolina State, Duke, Wake Forest, wherever the good parties were going on. I can remember going to Chapel Hill for a football game, and the head cheerleader got up and said, "Welcome to Kenan Stadium, home of the Carolina Tar Heels, better known as the biggest outdoor cocktail parties in the world." And I thought, I have arrived. This is what life is about. For my first couple of years of college, I spent a lot of time partying. I had my courses such that, well, I didn't really go to class much. And I really didn't pay attention a whole lot, and almost flunked out my first 2 years. But I did the important things. I was having fun, I was going to parties, I was drinking a lot. But I think I already knew at this point that my drinking was different than other people. And the reason I say that is because I could still control when I started to drink. And if I wasn't at home or with someone who would take care of me, I didn't start drinking. Because I already knew that once I started to drink, all bets were off about where I was going to end up. My junior year in college, I was, to sort of show you where things were, I was carrying an overload of classes, the overachiever, almost flunking out but carrying more classes. Was working on campus and got a job at a Pizza Hut. Now this Pizza Hut, this was before it was a family restaurant, it was just a drinking joint at this point. And I kept a pitcher of beer in the freezer for me to get me through the night. It never occurred to me that I was drinking on a job. It never occurred to me that there was anything wrong with that. You see, I'd learned to rationalize and justify anything I wanted or needed to do. And I needed to drink. So I did that. I wasn't getting any consequences, but by the time I was a junior in college, blackouts were a regular part of my being. And you may not know what that is, but that's where you continue functioning, but you don't remember anything that goes on. That was happening regularly, and I used all the excuses that I found in the big book. I didn't eat the right stuff. I didn't sleep well last night. You know, all those kind of things that would explain why I was the way I was. But I didn't know. You know, I just knew that I didn't fit where I was, and drinking made it easier. Drinking made it easier. Anyway, I got on through college, and I had, as I said, I did things the way other people did. So I majored in what my sister majored in. And I graduated with a number of degrees. I have a degree in home economics. And most people know I don't even cook. I have a degree in early childhood education. I have several teaching certificates and a couple of other things. So I went to work in a bank. I didn't even have money in this bank, but a friend of mine worked there, and that made it safe. That made it okay. And I started dating all the executives because this afforded me the life I wanted to lead. I got to go to the football games, the basketball games, the cocktail parties, and all those kind of things, and somebody else was paying for it all. I had arrived. This is what life was about. After I'd worked in the bank for a year or so, my father, who I thought walked on water, and he could get me to do about anything you wanted me to do, said, why don't you get a job in the area you were educated? So I sent in an application. Did not even go on an interview, and got a job teaching school. Not because of anything other than I had a certificate the principal needed. And I went to teach school, and I was scared to death because I was so ill prepared to teach. I was ill prepared for life. But I couldn't tell anybody. My ego was such that I couldn't let you know that I didn't know. So I would go in with this facade of being in charge and knowing what I was doing, and I would wait till everybody else went home. And then I'd walk through the other classrooms and see what everybody else was doing to see if I was doing the right stuff. Somewhere along the line, my father was diagnosed with cancer. And over a period of a couple of years, he had 5 operations and all that. And I would go to work, go home, and I was living in an apartment, so I would go either to the hospital or their home, wherever they were, and be the good daughter. And then I would go back to my apartment, call them, and let them know I was home safely. And then I would go out into the bar and drink. And I would have your pity in one hand and your drink in the other. And I used that to get what I needed. On October the 4th, 1975, which was my 25th birthday, my father died. And I took that very personally. And to this day, I don't know if I screamed it in my own head or screamed it out loud, but I said, if this is what you do to good people, I don't want you in my life, God. And I ended up on a downhill spiral of alcoholism. Over the next period of months, I don't know, I drank a lot, I worked, I went into a severe depression. And then I met a guy, and he made me laugh. And he was going to be my knight on the white horse. And his armor was a little tarnished, and his horse was less than white. And he didn't live up to my expectations. Of course, I know no one could have. But I was so insecure and so eat up with me that I needed to stay in this relationship. So I manipulated and pushed and pulled and almost killed him and myself in the process. But he just helped me get a little closer. And he was one person who never asked me about my drinking. He drank as much as I did. But somewhere in the spring of 1980, I think, My dates get a little fuzzy. You have to understand, I wasn't taking notes on what I was going to need to tell you when I got here. I can't say from the podium what he said to me, but he asked me to leave his life because he'd had about all he could take. And from the spring until the fall is a blur. It's a real blur. I don't know. I can tell you some facts. I had been seeing a psychiatrist for a long time, and because I knew I was crazy. And I would pay this psychiatrist to go in and make up stories. I never told him the truth, never told him what was going on in my life. I think there's something about sanity in our steps. But then I had 5 car accidents directly related to alcohol. I hit 3 telephone poles. I never got a ticket. Because you see, I have a mouth on me. And when I don't have to be careful about the truth, I can talk my way out of anything. And lying was very easy for me. I had done it for years. If you drank the way I did and lived the way I did, you had to lie to cover what was going on. Another thing in my favor was I had a brother who was a police officer. And I figured if they accidentally mess up and give me a ticket, Jim can save me. And if that didn't work, I had a brother who was a probation officer. So I figured I had all the bases covered. Anyway, I came out of a blackout one night, and those familiar lights were behind me, and they gave me their little test, and I passed or failed depending on whose side you're on. And they handcuffed me, threw me in the back seat of a police car, and took me to jail. And my way of dealing with things when I'm full of fear is to crack jokes. Well, I was cracking jokes and they weren't laughing. And I called my brother to come save me. And he said, "Sandy, get a good night's sleep," and hung up on me. I did not think that was funny. Now, he didn't, he had just had enough. He had walked the floor with me. He had tried everything, but he didn't know what to do with an alcoholic. He didn't know what to do with me. He had sent me to psychiatrists and counselors, and he thought that they could help me. But they didn't know what to do with an alcoholic. Anyway, I used to drink in the same places. I would walk into a bar and they would sit my drink on the table. And that fed my ego. I used to get phone calls at certain bars because they knew I drank at that bar on a certain night. And that fed my ego. So the owner of the place where I'd been drinking that night came and got me out of jail. And that fed my ego and took me home. And I began to drink. And I began to think. And I thought, you have been an embarrassment to your family and friends long enough. You know, people had begun to distance themselves from me because I was unpredictable. They did not know what was going to happen. And they did not know why I was the way I was. I didn't know why I was the way I was. You see, I chose alcohol. I did not choose alcoholism. I decided I was going to kill myself again. I had tried a couple of other times and was unsuccessful. And so I was going to slice my wrist, and I began to think. I live by myself. I have an answering machine. I work for a company out of state, and no one will know for at least 2 weeks that I've killed myself. And I will smell bad. And because I didn't want to smell bad, I decided I should call someone and let them know. So I called a friend of mine, and he was not there. He was one of my enablers. But he lived in one of these commune type places back then. And a friend of his answered the phone. And she didn't know me from Adam's house cat. But she heard me. And she figured out where I was and came and got me. And she started reading to me out of little books and said things like, first things first, Sandy, we don't have to figure out the rest of your life today. Easy does it, slow down. She was not a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, but she was a member of Al-Anon. And I will be eternally grateful to the program of Al-Anon for getting me where I belonged. She asked me if I'd like to talk to somebody. And I said, yes. We'll agree to anything at 3 o'clock in the morning. And I believe I had the perfect 12-step call made on me. Not because the woman worked in the field or had a degree in alcoholism or whatever. She just told me her story. She just told me her story. She talked about wanting to be a better mother and a better wife, a better employee. But alcohol was too powerful. It had too much of a hold on her. She talked about one time when her husband had poured out all of her alcohol and she needed a drink. And she drank vanilla extract. And that rang my bell. Because there was a time I remembered when I couldn't get to the ABC store and get something to drink. So I went to a drugstore and got cough medicine. And that took the edge off because I needed a drink. And she understood that. She asked me if I'd like to go to a meeting, and I got very busy. I needed, I needed to make arrangements for things. I was very busy on that weekend. And so I agreed to go with her on Monday. And I don't know when my last drink was. It was sometime that weekend. So I take my sobriety date from the first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous I went to. It was on that Monday in Greensboro. And I don't remember anything that was said at that meeting. You know, sometimes we worry about the newcomer. I was so rum-dum, I didn't remember anything that was going on there. But I did remember the laughter. And it was that deep belly laugh. And I realized I hadn't laughed in a long time. At the end of the meeting, they gave out some chips and somebody elbowed me. And I got up and got a chip, and I had no clue what I was doing. After the meeting, they asked me if I had, a lot of people came up, a lot of women, and gave me their phone number. And they asked me if I had a big book. And I didn't know what a big book was. And they made sure I had this big book. I've carried it for 34 years. It saved my life. It gave me a life. I began going to meetings. I can't say I had a pure heart when I came here. I came here to get the heat off. I came here because I didn't know what else to do, and somebody led me here. I want to believe today that God just knew I'd had enough, and He put people in my path so that they would lead me here. I got a sponsor, and thank God I came in at a time when they were more concerned with saving my rear end than hurting my feelings, because they hurt my feelings a lot. They were not shy about saying, sit down and shut up. You don't have anything to share that we need to hear. They started at the first page of this book. My sponsor looked at that and she said, what's on that page? I said, it's blank. And she said, that's what you know. We'll start from there. And we went through this book, word for word, line for line, paragraph for paragraph. And when we came to a list, we made it. When it said make an observation, we did. When it said take an action, we took it. And she walked me through this process. She told me what meetings to go to. She said, you need speaker meetings. You need to go and listen to people share their stories so you can identify it. And she said, somewhere along the line, somebody's going to ring your bell. And a lot of people have rung my bell. She told me that my life was so unmanageable that if we went down to the zoo and threw darts had the gorilla throw darts at the dartboard, he would make better decisions than I've been making. So that for now, anything I wanted to do needed to be run by wise counsel. So that's how I began. I talked to my sponsor every day. I didn't think there were options. They didn't give me the impression there were many. They said, you call me every day, and they told me when to call them, and I did. You show up at a meeting, and they were there. And you talk to them before the meeting and after the meeting. Most of the meetings were at 8 o'clock when I came in. And if you weren't there by 7:30, you were late. Because there's a meeting before the meeting, and the meeting after the meeting. And they informed me I was to stay for all three. We used to have, it was before styrofoam cups, we used to have the cups that we had to wash after the meeting. And we used to smoke in the meeting room, so we had ashtrays. So there was a lot of fellowship that went on after the meetings, cleaning up. And it was all good for me. It all helped me get away from that lifestyle that I'd had, drinking. You know, in step 2, it talks about that insanity of the mind. You know, that the problem lies in our minds. You know, once you're free from alcohol for a certain period of time, your body is free from it. But my mind still had that alcoholic thinking. And it took a lot of practice to get beyond that. My sponsor was very kind. She said things to me like, I was single when I got in here. And she said, any man who would be interested in you is sick and you need to stay away from him. And that really gave me an out. So if anybody approached me, I could say, oh, you're sick. I need to stay away from you. So I had trouble with some of the steps. I had trouble with the third step because, you see, I'd had this separation from God. I had blamed God for a lot that had gone on. And what I didn't blame on God, I blamed on my mother and, you know, all those other things we blame on. I could not take responsibility for me. And so we got through the idea of a power by using my sponsor in the group. I could accept that they were doing something that I had been unable to do. They were living sober. And they seemed to be happy. So that was a power greater than me. And then I moved on to the third step. And, you know, most of my problems have come because I think I'm so smart that with this keen mind, I can figure something out on my own. And that is very dangerous for me. Because I make up what the meaning of a word is. And it changes everything. You know, it said we made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God. Our life, our actions, and our thinking. Our actions and our thinking. So I began to run everything I was doing through this idea. Is this an action that is a positive action? Or is this a thought that is a positive thought? And I had to go through that process on everything I did. And when I wasn't sure, I had to run it by my sponsor. I used to write things down all the time during the day, so when I called my sponsor, I could run the list through with her. And it really began to help me see how warped and twisted my thinking was. You know, somewhere in the book it talks about that if you say you're an alcoholic, you're maladjusted to life, full flight from reality, and an outright mental defective. Well, that was me to a T. And so I began to see who I was in doing a 4-step. And my sponsor said we would do it exactly the way it was in the book. We made a list of all the resentments I had. I didn't know what a resentment was. She said, it's any refelt negative emotion. Put it on paper. So any refelt negative emotion went down. And then she helped me figure out why I had that. Why do you have that refelt negative emotion against this person, this place, this principle? And I had to put that on paper. And then she said, you know, what does this affect? It was always something in my ego. And what I understand today is how it came out was fear. My fear was the catch-all for everything. And so by the time I did my 5th step, it was really pretty anticlimactic, except for those few things I'd written down in code that no one would ever know, that I would take to the grave with me. And I went out to my sponsor's house to do my 5th step. I can still see it today. We were sitting there drinking coffee, smoking cigarettes. I was smoking 2 cigarettes at a time. I was so nervous. And doing all those things newcomers live on, you know, caffeine, nicotine, and sugar. And she said, let's get on our knees and invite God into this. So we got on our knees and we prayed. And when I got up, the first thing that came out of my mouth were those things in code that I was never going to share with anybody. And she wasn't shocked. You can't really shock a sponsor. I've learned that. But she wasn't shocked. She wasn't disgusted. She just shared with me some of her. And we got through that. We got through those things that I thought made me so unique. We got through those things that made me not fit, and I began to see how I had everything blown out of proportion. And she went through the things in the book where it said, reviewing what we've done, have you left anything out? And I think at that time I'd done the best I could do with what I had. And I went home and I sat quietly and I reviewed the first 5 proposals. And I began to feel some relief. I began to feel like I could breathe again. Now, I thought 6 and 7 were givens. There are only 2 short paragraphs in the book. And I thought once you had done all this work, you deserved a rest. But what I have learned is that I live in steps 6 and 7. It's a continuing process of uncovering, discovering, and discarding those things that make me uncomfortable today. Because if I am uncomfortable about anything today, I will revert back to old behavior. And my old behavior is to drink at something. And I don't ever want to go back to the person I was. I made a list of people I had harmed. I did it when I took my inventory. And my sponsor reviewed it with me, and with wise counsel, we began to make a plan for setting right. Now, my sponsor was a little old-fashioned, and she didn't believe that saying I'm sorry fit the bill. She said, if you stole $100, saying I'm sorry doesn't work. You pay it back with interest. Well, I stole people's time, and I had to pay that back with interest. I was not a good daughter. I was not a good friend. I was not a good employee, and I had to pay that back with interest. My mother was one who had caught a lot of the blame of the things that had gone on in my life. We couldn't be in the same room for 30 minutes without arguing. And my sponsor taught me to keep my mouth shut. She said, just because she says something, it's not your job to point out what you think she needs to hear. So, you know, when I kept my mouth shut, my mother stopped defending herself. And we began to have a much better relationship. And I was fortunate to have my mother until she was almost 90 years old. And we actually lived together for a couple of years, and that was good for our healing. My father died 5 years before I got sober. And I'd done all the things that they tell you to do about writing letters and going to the grave. And I still didn't feel complete relief. And my sponsor said, God will provide. And he provided someone else's mother that I got to care for, that I got to be the daughter that she didn't have. And I cared for her for many, many months. And it gave me that relief. I knew those prayers had been answered. I found the 10th step somewhere along the line. It says, we have entered the world of the Spirit. Our next function is to grow in understanding and effectiveness. This is not an overnight matter. It should continue for our lifetime. Continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. When these crop up. It doesn't say if, it says when these crop up. We ask God at once to help us. We talk to someone else about it. We make amends if necessary, and then we resolutely turn our thinking to someone we can help. Getting out of Sandy is the hardest thing I do. I'm selfish and self-centered. I want it my way. But when I am with you, I'm better in here. When I answer that phone, I'm better in here. When I sit down with you and share the book with you, I'm better in here. Doesn't matter what we talk about. When I'm putting the focus on you, God frees me of whatever's working on me here. I told you I went to, I think I did, to 12 years of Catholic school. I knew prayers in several languages, but they never touched my heart. When I came here, they said I had to get things simpler. Please, help, thank you. You know, they said that there were prayers in this book written just for alcoholics like me. And that's where I started. That's where I started, with those prayers, those things that seemed to be reaching out to me. And I can tell you, I said those words, and they didn't mean a whole lot to me at first. But I kept doing what I was told to do. And somewhere along the line, this heart opened, and I began to feel what I'm saying. I've had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. That's the message I bring to you. And I try to practice these principles in all my affairs. This program is not in competition with any area of my life. If I can't be a better employee because of what I found here, if I can't be a better wife, a better friend, a better member of the community, then I better get back in this book and find out what I missed. This program gave me a life. I am happy, joyous, and free today because of what I found here. That doesn't mean everything goes my way, and it doesn't mean that every day is a joyful day. You know, it says in here somewhere that if we fail to perfect and enlarge our spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, we will not be able to withstand these certain low points that lie ahead. You know, when life comes at you, as it will, you better have something to stand on. When I was 3 years sober, I met a wonderful man. His name was Fred. And we dated, we married, we had a great life. We had pigeons galore. He was in the program. We were in and out of our house. We were going here and going there. We were always busy with AA work. In April of 2002, Fred died. And I was rocked to my core. I don't care how long you've been sober. When life comes at you like that, you will be rocked to your core. And you better have something that works. Before I could turn around, the AA and Al-Anon community surrounded me. They reminded me to eat when I couldn't remember. They reminded me to breathe. And they breathed life back into me. I had been living at the coast for a while, and I moved back to Greensboro because I'd gotten fond of eating again, and I decided I'd go back to work. And so I was working, I had a house, and I had a dog, and I had dated a little bit after a couple years, and I thought dating was overrated. So I decided I'm happy the way I am. You know, God, if you have anything in mind for me, let me know. So he brought somebody into my life, and we've been married 10 years now, and we have a great life. We have an AA home. We have pigeons galore. We have going here and going there, doing things. Life is good. Life is good. What I know, I've learned here. I know that when Fred died, I didn't know what to do. I'd never had a spouse die, so I went to a meeting that night. He died on Saturday morning. I was at Star Mountain, Greensboro on Saturday night, standing at the door greeting people, because you had taught me that that's what I do, and I knew how to greet people. The week after he died, I had 2 12-step calls. That was back when we still had real active 12-step calls, and I knew they were gifts from God. This is a program that works. It works in the rough going. I'm going to wrap it up here because I know there's some birthdays that we got to give out, and I always close with something that my sponsor told me early on. She said, you know, Sandy, there are some days that are just hanging on days. When you get to the end of your rope and you don't know what to do, just hang on. And this is a direct quote. She said, Sandy, if your ass falls off, you don't take a drink. You just find a new way to sit. And the place you find it is in an AA meeting. Thank y'all for being here.